The boardroom fell silent as the janitor's calloused hand pressed down on the CEO's $1,000 phone. The crack echoed like a gunshot. What clattered onto the mahogany table made Amelia Grant's blood run cold. A military dog tag engraved with her dead father's name. How did this minimum wage nobody possess her father's most sacred possession? The answer would shatter everything she thought she knew about honor, sacrifice, and the invisible man who'd been watching over her company all along. Stay until the end and comment your city below. Let's see how far this story travels. The October sun hung mercilessly over downtown Chicago, casting sharp geometric shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Grant & Company's executive tower. 23 stories above the noise and chaos of Michigan Avenue, the air in the Northwest Conference Room tasted of leather, ambition, and the particular brand of cologne that cost more per ounce than most people's groceries. Caleb Reed pushed his janitorial cart slowly along the hallway's edge, his worn, rubber-soled shoes whispering against Italian marble that probably cost more to install than he'd earned in the past 3 years. He'd learned to move like a ghost through these corridors, present but invisible, necessary but unnoticed. The executives liked it that way. They could speak freely about mergers and acquisitions, about whose career would be sacrificed at the next quarterly review, about which subordinate was sleeping with which manager. To them, Caleb was just part of the furniture, no more conscious or consequential than the potted ficus in the corner. He didn't mind. Invisibility had its advantages when you were a 38-year-old single father trying to keep your head down and your daughter fed. Mr. Reed, the voice was clipped, professional, belonging to Jennifer Park, Amelia Grant's executive assistant. The boardroom needs a quick pass before the afternoon session. Someone spilled coffee near the credenza. Yes, ma'am, Caleb replied, his voice barely above a murmur. He'd perfected that tone over the past 18 months, deferential without being obsequious, present without being intrusive. Jennifer nodded curtly and disappeared back toward her desk, her heels clicking an efficient staccato rhythm. Caleb guided his cart through the boardroom's double doors, taking in the familiar landscape of power. The mahogany table stretched nearly 20 feet, polished to a mirror shine. 12 leather executive chairs surrounded it like thrones. The walls were decorated with enlarged photographs of Grant & Company's achievements, groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, awards presentations. In every photo, Amelia Grant stood front and center, her smile calculated to project confidence and control. Caleb found the coffee stain easily enough, a brown splash near the glass-topped credenza where someone had been careless with their afternoon espresso. He pulled out his cleaning supplies and got to work, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd cleaned enough floors to circle the earth twice over. He was so focused on the task that he didn't hear the conference room door swing open again. I don't care what the logistics team says, Marcus. We're moving forward with the Valor Square project by December 1st, or heads will roll. Amelia Grant swept into the room like a storm system, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing emphatically at points only she could see. She was tall, nearly 6 feet in the stiletto heels she favored, with dark hair pulled back in a style that probably had a fancy French name. Her charcoal suit was tailored precisely to her frame, and the diamonds in her ears caught the afternoon light with calculated brilliance. She was, Caleb had observed over many months, the kind of person who needed witnesses to her importance. I've sunk $3 million into preliminary design, Amelia continued, pacing near the windows. My father's legacy deserves better than departmental foot-dragging and union complaints. Make it happen, Marcus. That's why I pay you. She ended the call with a sharp tap and tossed the phone onto the conference table without looking, already moving toward the credenza where her coffee waited. The phone skittered across the polished surface, spinning slightly as it slid toward the far edge. Caleb saw it happening in slow motion, the $1,000 device heading straight for the table's corner, then the certain doom of the marble floor beyond. Without thinking, he straightened from his crouch and reached out, his hand intercepting the phone's trajectory just before disaster struck. The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like 3 hours. Did you just... Amelia turned, her eyes wide with disbelief. Did you just touch my phone? Caleb froze, the device resting in his palm. He could feel the warmth of it, still hot from her grip and the processor working inside. I'm sorry, ma'am, it was going to fall. So you grabbed it? Without permission? Amelia's voice rose half an octave. Do you have any idea how much that costs? How much sensitive information is on that device? I was trying to help. By putting your dirty hands all over it? She crossed the distance between them in 4 sharp strides, her heels striking the floor like a judge's gavel. That phone costs more than you make in a month, probably more than you make in 2 months, and you just grabbed it like it was some plastic toy. Caleb looked down at his hands. They were clean. He'd scrubbed them twice before starting his rounds, the way he always did. But he understood what she meant. They were working hands, calloused hands, hands that cleaned toilets and mopped floors and emptied trash bins, hands that didn't belong in the same reality as $1,000 smartphones. I apologize, he said quietly. I should have let it fall. You should have stayed in your lane, Amelia snapped. She held out her hand imperiously. Give it back, carefully. Caleb moved to place the phone in her palm, but his thumb accidentally pressed the side button as he transferred it. The screen blazed to life, showing her home screen, a photo of herself accepting some award, he noticed, and the sudden illumination made him blink. His grip shifted. The phone slipped. And in that terrible moment of synchronized bad luck, both of them lunged for it simultaneously. Amelia's hand collided with Caleb's forearm. His elbow knocked against her wrist. The phone flew upward instead of downward, spinning end over end like a satellite losing orbit. It landed flat on the conference table with a sound that was both crack and thud, the terrible noise of expensive technology meeting immovable wood at exactly the wrong angle. Oh my God, Amelia breathed. Oh my God, what did you do? Caleb's stomach dropped into his shoes. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, you absolute idiot. Amelia snatched the phone from the table, her face flushing crimson. Do you have any idea what you've just done? This has my entire life on it. My emails, my contacts, my... She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she stared at the device. The screen was intact, miraculously, impossibly intact. But something was wrong with the case. The impact had split the protective cover along one seam, and now the corner gaped open like a broken bone through skin, and something was sliding out of that gap, something small and metallic. It hit the table with a tiny clink and lay there spinning slowly, catching the afternoon light. Caleb recognized it instantly. His entire body went rigid, every muscle locking down as if someone had jabbed him with a high-voltage wire. Amelia stared at the object, her mouth opening and closing silently. Then she reached out with trembling fingers and picked it up. It was a dog tag. Military issue. Stainless steel, worn smooth at the edges from years of being carried close to someone's skin. The stamped letters were still clearly legible. Grant, O&M 571 42 8891 OPOS Methodist. Beneath that, in smaller letters, CPT U.S. Army. Where did you get this? Amelia's voice was barely audible, each word emerging like she was pulling them from some deep, dark well. How do you have my father's dog tag? Caleb didn't answer immediately. He was too busy calculating trajectories and outcomes, trying to figure out how this moment had arrived 18 months ahead of schedule, trying to decide if the universe was cosmically aligned or catastrophically broken. Sir, I asked you a question. Amelia's hand clenched around the dog tag so hard her knuckles turned white. My father died 6 years ago. This tag was buried with him. So I'll ask you one more time, and if I don't get a straight answer, I'm calling security and possibly the police. How do you have Captain Owen Grant's identification tag? The conference room door opened again, and 3 executives walked in mid-conversation, already pulling out chairs for the afternoon session. They stopped when they saw the frozen tableau, the CEO standing rigid with something clutched in her fist, the janitor standing equally still with his hands at his sides, and between them a tension thick enough to choke on. Amelia? The speaker was Richard Morton, the chief financial officer, a silver-haired man who'd been with Grant & Company since before Amelia was born. Is everything all right? No. Amelia didn't look away from Caleb. Richard, call security. This man has stolen something extremely valuable from me. Ma'am, I didn't steal anything, Caleb said quietly. That tag was given to me by Captain Grant himself. That's impossible. Amelia's voice shook. My father died 6 years ago in Afghanistan. There's no way you... 7 years ago, Caleb corrected gently. October 14th, 2018, outside a compound near Kandahar. I was there. The room went absolutely silent. 2 more executives had entered, and now all 5 of them stared at the janitor who'd just claimed connection to their CEO's deepest wound. You're lying, but Amelia's voice had lost its certainty. You're some kind of con artist who researched my father's service record, and he gave me that tag 3 hours before he died, Caleb continued, his voice still soft but now carrying something else, something that made every person in the room unconsciously straighten their spines. He made me promise that if he didn't make it out, I'd find you and give it to you myself. He said you'd need to know that he was thinking of you at the end. Security is on their way up, Jennifer announced from the doorway, phone in hand. Amelia shook her head sharply. Cancel it. When Jennifer hesitated, she raised her voice. Cancel it. Everyone out. This meeting is postponed. Amelia, we need to finalize the... Richard started. Out! The word came out as a roar, and the executives scattered like startled birds, Jennifer pulling the door shut behind them with a decisive click. Alone again, Amelia and Caleb faced each other across 3 feet of air that felt like 3 miles of minefield. You were in Afghanistan, Amelia said flatly, serving with my father. Not exactly serving with him, Caleb replied. I was private contractor security. Your father's unit was providing escort for a supply convoy we were guarding. We got ambushed on Route Falcon, about 40 clicks outside Kandahar. My father was a logistics officer. He wasn't supposed to be in combat situations. Amelia's grip on the dog tag loosened slightly. That's what they told me, that his death was a freak accident, a mortar round that landed in the wrong place. That's what they told you because the truth was classified for 4 years, Caleb said. Your father wasn't a logistics officer anymore. He'd volunteered for a tactical unit doing high-value transport. The convoy we were guarding was carrying $3 million in cash destined for tribal leaders we were trying to turn. The ambush wasn't random. It was precisely planned, and we walked right into it. Amelia slowly lowered herself into one of the conference room chairs, still clutching the dog tag. Tell me exactly what happened. Are you sure you want to know? I've spent 6 years wondering why my father really died. Whatever you tell me can't be worse than the scenarios I've imagined. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Please, I need to know. Caleb glanced toward the windows, toward the city spreading out in every direction, and for a moment he wasn't in a glass tower in Chicago anymore. He was back in the dust and heat and terrible clarity of a moment when everything went wrong. The convoy was 7 vehicles, he began. 3 cargo trucks in the middle, armored Humvees front and back. I was in the lead vehicle. Your father was commanding from the rear. We were making good time, no signs of trouble, and then he paused, choosing his words carefully. The IED that hit us was sophisticated. It didn't destroy the lead vehicle. It disabled it. Took out our wheels and communications, but left us alive. And then the shooting started. From where? Everywhere. They'd set up a perfect kill box, elevated positions on both sides of the road, overlapping fields of fire. We couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. All we could do was hunker down and try not to die. Caleb's voice remained steady, but his eyes had gone distant. The engagement lasted 43 minutes. We lost 2 men in the first 5 minutes, 3 more in the next 20. Your father kept the rear guard together, kept returning fire, kept calling for air support even though our communications were scrambled. How did you survive? Your father saved us. Caleb looked directly at her now. 30 minutes in, he realized we were being flanked on the east side. If they'd completed that maneuver, they would have had clear shots at the cash trucks and all of us. So he took 4 men and launched a counter-assault on the flanking position. Amelia's breath caught. He wasn't infantry. He wasn't trained for... No, he wasn't. But he was smart and he was brave and he understood the terrain better than the people attacking us. Caleb's voice softened. His counter-assault broke their flank. It gave our remaining vehicles time to form a defensive position. It let us hold on until the Apache gunships finally arrived, but it also put him directly in the line of fire. And that's where he died. Not immediately. Caleb reached into his pocket slowly, aware that Amelia was watching his every movement. He pulled out a second dog tag, identical to the first but more worn, the letters slightly deeper with age. He'd been hit twice, both times in the chest. His vest caught the rounds, but the impact had cracked his sternum and bruised his heart. He knew he was dying. We all did. So he gave you his tag. Amelia stared at the matching pair of stainless steel rectangles. He called me over in the last few minutes. We had him on a stretcher, trying to keep him comfortable while we waited for medevac. He could barely breathe, but he grabbed my vest and pulled me down close. Caleb's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said, "My daughter, Amelia. She's in Chicago. Grant and Company. Find her. Tell her I wasn't scared at the end. Tell her I was proud. Tell her—" His voice cracked slightly. "Tell her that honor doesn't need an audience." The silence that followed was broken only by the faint hum of the HVAC system and the distant sounds of the city far below. "Honor doesn't need an audience," Amelia repeated mechanically. "He used to say that when I was little. Whenever I'd do something good and want everyone to know about it." A tear slid down her cheek and she didn't bother wiping it away. "He'd say real honor is what you do when nobody's watching. Real respect is the quiet kind. He made me promise I'd find you and tell you myself, face to face. He didn't want you hearing it from some official report or sanitized briefing." Caleb placed the second dog tag on the table between them. He wore 2 sets. Most officers did. One for his records, one for occasions like this. He gave me the primary set and made me promise I'd return it to you personally. That was 7 years ago. Amelia's voice hardened slightly. "Why am I only seeing this now? Why have you been working here for over a year, cleaning these floors, emptying my trash cans, and you never said a word?" "Because I promised him I'd give it to you when you were ready to hear it." "Ready? How could you possibly know when I'd be ready?" Caleb met her eyes steadily. "Because he told me you'd need time. He said you'd be angry at first, then buried in grief, then buried in work trying to escape the grief. He said, I'd know you were ready when I saw you building something that honored his memory without making it about you." "Valor Square." The words came out like an accusation. "The memorial project. You think that's about me? Isn't it?" Caleb's tone remained gentle but firm. "From what I've heard in this building, and janitors hear everything, ma'am, Valor Square is a $3 million monument featuring your father's name in 20-foot letters, with you as the primary donor. The dedication is scheduled to coincide with the anniversary of your becoming CEO. There's a statue of a soldier that looks suspiciously like your father, but somehow also flatters your family resemblance. That's not, I'm honoring his sacrifice. You're building a billboard." Caleb's words hit like physical blows. "You're constructing a monument to your pain and calling it his legacy. And your father knew you'd do exactly that, because you've always needed the world to see your achievements. He loved that about you and worried about it in equal measure." Amelia stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. "You don't know anything about me. You've been here 18 months, cleaning floors. You have no right to judge." "You're correct, I don't know you well. But I knew your father during the last day of his life, and he talked about you for most of those final hours. He told me about the little girl who'd organize neighborhood cleanup days and demand certificates for every participant. The teenager who'd volunteer at soup kitchens, but only if the local newspaper would cover it. The young woman who joined the board of 3 charities and made sure her name was on every press release. I was trying to make a difference. You were trying to be seen making a difference. There's a distinction your father spent years trying to teach you." Caleb's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. He said his greatest regret was that he'd never found the right way to show you that real honor, real respect, real integrity. They're quiet languages. They're spoken in actions nobody notices until years later. They're written in the small choices you make when the world isn't watching. "That's easy to say when you're nobody." Amelia's voice cracked with fury and pain. "When you're invisible and anonymous and your greatest achievement is keeping the floors shiny. But some of us are trying to actually change things, to build things, to leave a mark on the world that matters." "And what mark are you leaving?" Caleb gestured toward the windows, toward the city beyond. "In 18 months, I've watched this company. I've seen how you treat the people who work for you. I've emptied the trash cans in the HR director's office, and read the complaints employees are too scared to file officially. I've cleaned the bathroom where your assistant cried for 20 minutes after you screamed at her for using the wrong font in a presentation. I've mopped the hallway outside the office where you fired a single mother 2 weeks before Christmas because her department's numbers were down 3%. That's business. That's the hard decisions that leaders have to. That's tyranny dressed up as leadership. Caleb's voice rose slightly for the first time. That's the opposite of everything your father believed in. He led men through hell that day in Afghanistan. He died protecting people who'd only known him for 6 weeks. And do you know what they said about him at his memorial service? The one you probably don't know happened because it was just his unit, no press, no cameras? Amelia shook her head mutely. They said he knew all their names. Every single soldier, contractor, and local interpreter. He knew their kids' names, their spouses' names. He asked about their families and remembered the answers. When one of the junior enlisted men got emergency leave for his mother's cancer, your father personally drove him to the airfield at 3 a.m. When an interpreter's brother was threatened by the Taliban, your father moved both of them into our compound and stood guard himself the first night. He was a good man, Amelia whispered. I know he was. He was. But you're not becoming him. You're becoming everything he worked his whole life to never be. Caleb picked up both dog tags and held them out. He wanted me to give you these, to tell you the story, to help you understand that the greatest leaders are the ones who make everyone around them better, not smaller. But he also warned me that you might not be able to hear it, that you might be too far down your own path to find your way back. Get out. Amelia's voice was barely audible. Get out of this room. Get out of this building. You're fired. Yes, ma'am. Caleb placed the dog tags gently on the conference table. For what it's worth, your father loved you more than his own life. Everything he did, every choice he made, including the one that killed him. He did thinking about you. He just hoped that someday you'd understand that love doesn't need a monument. It needs to be lived. He turned toward the door, pushing his cleaning cart ahead of him. Wait. Amelia's voice stopped him at the threshold. How did you end up here? At this company specifically? Caleb looked back over his shoulder. Your father's last request was that I find you and tell you this story in person. But he also asked me to watch over you from a distance until you were ready to hear it. So when I left the military and needed a job that would let me be near my daughter, I looked for work in Chicago, and I found an opening here. He smiled faintly. Turns out janitors really are invisible. I could be 2 feet away from you in a hallway and you'd walk right past without noticing. It's the perfect cover for keeping a promise to a dying man. 7 years. Amelia's voice broke. You've been planning this for 7 years. Not planning, waiting. There's a difference. Caleb pushed the cart forward. I'll have my desk cleared by end of day. I'm sorry about your phone. He was gone before she could respond, the door clicking shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Amelia stood alone in the conference room, the 2 dog tags gleaming on the mahogany table like accusations. Outside the windows, Chicago sprawled in every direction. Millions of people living their lives, chasing their dreams, fighting their private battles. Somewhere in that sea of humanity was a janitor who'd kept a promise for 7 years, who'd watched her from the shadows, waiting for a sign of her father's honor to manifest in her choices, and who'd seen nothing but the opposite. She picked up the dog tags with trembling hands, feeling the weight of them, the warmth from where they'd rested against someone's skin, her father's skin, once upon a time. Now carried by a stranger who knew her father better than she did, who understood his values better than his own daughter. The worst part was that Caleb had been right about everything. Amelia thought about the last 2 years since she'd become CEO. She thought about Valor Square, with its massive statues and her family name in letters tall enough to be seen from airplanes. She thought about the dedication ceremony she'd planned, with the mayor and the press corps and a carefully curated guest list of people who could enhance the Grant family brand. She thought about her father's actual values, the quiet kind of honor, the invisible acts of service, the way he died protecting people whose names would never make the news. And she thought about the single father janitor who'd kept a 7-year promise, who'd watched her become someone her father would barely recognize, who'd finally delivered his message even knowing it would cost him his job. Her phone, the expensive, cracked device that had started this entire catastrophe, buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Security is asking if there was an incident. What should I tell them? Amelia stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, "Tell them everything's fine, and cancel the rest of my afternoon. I need to think." She walked to the windows and looked out at the city, at the patterns of light and shadow stretching to the horizon. Somewhere down there was a little girl named Lily, who had a father who kept his promises even when it cost him everything. Somewhere down there was a man who understood honor better than every executive in this building combined. And somewhere inside herself, buried under layers of ambition and image and carefully constructed success, was the daughter Owen Grant had raised, the one who'd once believed that doing good was its own reward. The question was whether that girl still existed, or if she'd been replaced entirely by the woman who'd just fired the only person brave enough to tell her the truth. Amelia closed her fingers around the dog tags and felt the sharp edges bite into her palm. The pain was clarifying, real, more honest than anything she'd felt in months. She picked up her phone, miraculously still functional despite the cracked case, and pulled up her contacts. Her thumb hovered over Marcus Chen's name, the project manager for Valor Square. One phone call, and she could keep moving forward as planned, keep building her monument, keep telling herself it was about honor and legacy and respect for her father's memory. Or she could make a different kind of call, the kind that would probably cost her the image she'd spent years constructing, the kind that might make people question her judgment, the kind that her father might have made. Amelia took a deep breath and started dialing. Outside the conference room, in the hallways and offices of Grant & Company, people were already whispering. The janitor had done something to upset the CEO. The CEO had screamed loud enough to be heard through 2 closed doors. The janitor had been fired on the spot. By tomorrow, there would be a new janitor, someone more careful, someone who understood their place. And Caleb Reed would be just another forgotten name in the vast machinery of corporate America. Or so everyone assumed. But in the basement level, where the maintenance staff kept their lockers and took their breaks, Caleb was carefully packing his few possessions into a worn duffel bag. And on his phone, saved in a folder he'd never deleted, were copies of every conversation he'd overheard in the past 18 months. Every casual mention of regulatory shortcuts, every discussion of accounting gray areas, every moment when the leaders of Grant & Company had said things they'd assumed no one important was listening to. He'd hoped never to need those files. He'd hoped Amelia would remember her father's lessons on her own. He'd hoped the 7-year promise would end with understanding and growth. But Caleb had learned in Afghanistan that hope was a luxury, not a strategy. So he'd kept backup plans. Because honor might be a quiet language, but justice, when necessary, could speak volumes. The apartment Caleb returned to that evening sat on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in Pilsen, where the rent was almost affordable, and the neighbors spoke 3 different languages depending on which door you knocked on. The stairs creaked under his weight as he climbed, the duffel bag heavy on his shoulder, not from its contents, which were minimal, but from the weight of everything it represented. He could hear Lily before he even reached the door. She was singing something off-key, one of those nonsense songs 7-year-olds invented that somehow made more sense than half the conversations adults had. The sound loosened something in his chest that had been tight since the moment Amelia Grant's phone had cracked open on that conference table. "Daddy!" Lily flung the door open before he could get his key out, her gap-toothed smile bright enough to power the entire building. Her dark hair was escaping from the ponytail, Mrs. Chen from downstairs had probably put in that morning, and there was what looked like marker on her left cheek. "You're home early. Mrs. Chen said you wouldn't be here until 6, but it's only 5:30, and I checked the clock 4 times to make sure." "Hey, baby girl." Caleb dropped the duffel and scooped her up, feeling her skinny arms wrap around his neck like a lifeline. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo he bought in bulk from the dollar store and something else. Paint, maybe, or glue. "What are you working on?" "A project for school. We're supposed to draw our heroes." Lily wiggled down and grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the kitchen table where papers and art supplies covered every available surface. "I drew you, but Mrs. Chen said I should add more colors because heroes are supposed to be bright, and you're all gray and dark in my picture." Caleb looked at the drawing. She'd rendered him in surprising detail for a 7-year-old. The janitor's uniform, the cart he pushed, even the expression on his face that he didn't realize he wore until he saw it captured in crayon and marker. She was right. It was mostly gray and dark blue, the colors of industrial carpet and fluorescent-lit hallways. "Heroes don't have to be bright," he said quietly, kneeling beside her chair. Sometimes the best heroes are the ones nobody notices. That's what I told Mrs. Chen. Lily's face lit up with vindication. I said you're a hero because you work really hard and you take care of me and you never complain even when you're tired. But she said real heroes save people from danger. Well, Mrs. Chen isn't wrong about that either. Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, the events of the afternoon finally catching up with him. There are lots of different kinds of heroes. What kind are you? The question was so direct, so innocently complicated, that Caleb had to pause. How did you explain to a 7-year-old that you'd once been the kind of hero who carried a rifle and wore body armor, who'd pulled wounded men from burning vehicles and returned fire while calling for medevac? How did you explain that you'd watched better men die, that you'd made a promise to one of them and that promise had just blown up in your face? I'm the kind who keeps promises, he said finally, even when it's hard. Like promising to always come home to me? Exactly like that. Lily studied him with the unnerving perception that children sometimes had, the ability to see past words into the truth beneath. Something bad happened today. What makes you say that? You're home early and you brought your bag and you have that look. She pointed at his face. The one you get when the bills come and there's too many of them. Caleb couldn't help but smile. You're too smart for 7. Mrs. Chen says I'm an old soul. Lily picked up a purple crayon and added something to her drawing. Did you lose your job? There was no point in lying. Lily would figure it out anyway when he started staying home during the day, when he started searching the want ads, when the worry lines around his eyes deepened into trenches. Yeah, baby, I did. Because you kept your promise? The question hit him like a punch. How did you... You told me about the soldier who saved you, the one whose daughter you had to find. Lily didn't look up from her drawing. You said you had to tell her something important about her daddy. You said it might make her mad, but you had to do it anyway because you promised. Was today the day you told her? Caleb had forgotten that conversation, had forgotten that children absorbed everything even when you thought they weren't paying attention. Yeah, today was the day. And she got mad. She got mad. But you did the right thing. Lily looked up now, her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, the mother she barely remembered, fierce with certainty. That's what matters. You taught me that. You said doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. I did say that. Caleb pulled her into another hug, feeling the sting of tears he refused to let fall. When did you get so wise? I'm an old soul, she repeated solemnly. Can we have mac and cheese for dinner? The kind from the box, not the fancy kind. We can have anything you want. Even ice cream after? Don't push your luck. They ate dinner at the cluttered kitchen table, Lily chattering about her day at school while Caleb tried to calculate how long his savings would last, how quickly he could find another job, what he'd do if the answer to both questions was not long enough. The math was brutal and unforgiving. The same math that millions of Americans did every day, trying to make insufficient numbers somehow add up to survival. After Lily was in bed, Caleb sat in the dark living room and pulled out his phone. The files were still there, backed up in 3 different places because he'd learned in the military that redundancy saved lives. Conversations about regulatory shortcuts, discussions of creative accounting, that particularly damning exchange about the overseas factory conditions that Grant and Company had deliberately ignored because addressing them would cut into profit margins. He'd gathered it all without meaning to, simply by being invisible while the powerful spoke freely, and now he had a choice to make. He could delete it all and walk away. Find another job, keep his head down, raise his daughter in anonymity. It was the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that wouldn't paint a target on his back. Or he could use what he knew. Not for revenge. He'd learned in Afghanistan that revenge was a poison that killed the drinker first, but for accountability. To force Grant and Company to live up to the values they claimed to embody. To honor Owen Grant's memory in a way his daughter apparently couldn't. The phone buzzed in his hand, startling him. A text from an unknown number. This is Amelia Grant. I need to speak with you. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., the coffee shop on Jackson and State, please. Caleb stared at the message for a long time. The please was what got him. He'd never heard Amelia Grant say that word in 18 months of working at her company. Then again, he'd never seen her look the way she had in those final moments in the conference room, the carefully constructed armor cracking to reveal something raw and wounded underneath. He typed back, "I'll be there." The response came almost immediately. "Thank you?" Two words that carried the weight of worlds. Caleb set the phone down and looked around his apartment, at the secondhand furniture and the peeling paint, at Lily's backpack by the door and the pile of bills on the counter, at all the evidence of a life built on the margins of someone else's prosperity. He'd chosen this life deliberately, had walked away from opportunities that would have paid better but cost more in other ways. He'd chosen to be present for his daughter, to keep promises even when they were expensive, to live according to principles that seemed increasingly quaint in a world that rewarded ruthlessness and called it business acumen. But maybe, just maybe, those choices were about to mean something larger than his own small sphere. Sleep came late and brought dreams of dust and gunfire, of Owen Grant's face in those final moments, of promises made and kept, and yet somehow still unfulfilled. Morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of October day that reminded Chicago it was building toward winter. Caleb dropped Lily at school early. She had breakfast club on Wednesdays, one of the free programs he'd learned to navigate like a combat veteran navigating hostile territory, and then headed downtown on the Blue Line. The coffee shop was one of those places that served $12 lattes and had more varieties of milk than a dairy farm. Caleb ordered black coffee because it was cheapest and found a table near the window where he could watch the door. Old habits from the military, from a time when knowing who was entering a room could mean the difference between living and dying. Amelia arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, and Caleb almost didn't recognize her. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, no makeup that he could detect. She looked younger without the armor of her executive uniform, and more tired, like she'd spent the night wrestling demons that had won more rounds than they'd lost. She spotted him and walked over, carrying her own coffee, something complicated and topped with foam. "Thank you for coming." "You said please." Caleb gestured to the chair across from him. That seemed significant. Amelia sat down, cradling her cup like it was the only warm thing in a cold world. "I didn't sleep last night. I kept thinking about everything you said, about my father, about who I've become." She looked up and met his eyes. "You were right, about all of it. I didn't tell you those things to be right. I told you because your father asked me to." "I know, that's what makes it worse." She pulled something from her pocket, the 2 dog tags threaded now on a simple chain. "I've been wearing these since yesterday, trying to remember what it felt like when he was alive, when I was the person he thought I could become." "And what did you remember?" "That I used to care more about doing good than looking good. That I used to volunteer at homeless shelters without calling the press first. That my father used to tell me the measure of a person wasn't what they did on stage, but what they did in the shadows." Amelia's voice cracked slightly. "When did I forget all of that?" "Probably around the same time most people do, when the world started rewarding you for the performance instead of the substance." Caleb sipped his coffee. "It's not unique to you. It's the way our culture works now. Everything's about the image, the brand, the narrative you can sell. That doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the ambient noise of the coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations, the clink of cups on saucers. Outside the window, Chicago woke up and went to work, millions of people living their lives, most of them trying their best with whatever they had. "I called Marcus Chen last night," Amelia said finally, "the project manager for Valor Square. I told him we're canceling the entire project." Caleb's eyebrows rose. "That's a bold move." "It's the right move. The whole thing was a monument to my ego dressed up as my father's legacy." She twisted the dog tag chain around her fingers. $3 million that could have actually helped people, actually made a difference, and I was going to spend it on a statue of my father that somehow looked like me. What kind of narcissistic... She stopped, took a breath. "Anyway, it's canceled." "What will you do instead?" "I don't know yet. That's part of why I wanted to talk to you." Amelia leaned forward. "You knew my father. You understood what he valued. And you've been watching this company for 18 months. If you were going to honor his memory in a way that actually mattered, what would you do? The question was sincere, and Caleb took his time answering. Your father cared about people who were invisible. The ones doing essential work that nobody noticed or valued. The interpreters who risked their lives to help us. The local vendors who fed us. The junior enlisted soldiers who did the actual heavy lifting while officers got the credit. He met her eyes. If you really want to honor him, you'd start by seeing the people in your own company that you've trained yourself not to notice. The support staff, maintenance, cleaning crews. All of them. The people who make your company function, but whose names you don't know. The single mothers working 2 jobs to feed their kids. The immigrants sending money home to families in countries you've never thought about. The people one medical emergency away from complete financial collapse. Caleb's voice remained gentle but firm. Your father died protecting people like that. He thought they mattered as much as anyone else. Maybe you could start by acting like you believe that too. Amelia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still worrying the dog tag chain. I fired you yesterday, said some terrible things. You were angry. You had a right to be. No, I didn't. You were telling me the truth and I punished you for it because the truth hurt. She looked up. I want to unfire you, bring you back with a proper salary this time. And I want your help fixing what I've broken. I appreciate that, but before you say no, let me finish. Amelia's words came faster now, like she'd been rehearsing this. I've been CEO for 2 years and I've made this company more profitable and more miserable in equal measure. The numbers look great, but the culture is toxic. People are scared of me. They should respect me, but instead they fear me, and I'm smart enough to know those aren't the same thing. She paused. My father would be ashamed of what I've built. I need to fix it, and I can't do that without help from someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. There are consultants for that. People with degrees in organizational behavior. I don't need consultants who'll tell me what I want to hear in expensive jargon. I need someone who knew my father, who understands what real leadership looks like, and who's proven he'll tell me the truth even when it costs him. Amelia's voice turned urgent. Please, let me try to make this right. Caleb thought about Lily, about the bills on his counter, about the math that never quite added up. He thought about his promise to Owen Grant, about whether that promise extended beyond delivering a message to actually helping the daughter become who her father believed she could be. He thought about the files on his phone and whether exposing Grant and Company's problems from the outside would achieve anything beyond temporary satisfaction. What exactly are you offering? He asked. Director of Facility Operations, real salary, benefits, office on the executive floor. Your job would be to tell me the truth about how this company actually functions from the ground up, and to help me implement changes that would make it somewhere my father would actually be proud to have his name attached to. I'm not qualified for that. I'm a janitor with a high school diploma and military experience. You're someone who kept a 7-year promise. You're someone who spent 18 months watching this company and understanding it better than people who've worked here for decades. You're someone my father trusted with his final message. Amelia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That's qualified enough for me. What about the rest of your executive team? They're not going to accept some janitor suddenly sitting in on board meetings. Then they can resign. The steel in her voice reminded him suddenly of Owen Grant under fire, making impossible decisions with absolute certainty. This is my company. My father built it from nothing and left it to me. If I want to promote someone who actually understands its values, that's my prerogative. People will think you've lost your mind. Good. I've been too concerned with what people think for too long. She reached across the table and gripped his hand. Please, Caleb, let me try to do better. Let me try to be someone my father would recognize. Caleb looked at their joined hands, hers soft and manicured, his calloused and scarred, and thought about all the different ways this could go wrong. He thought about Lily asking him what kind of hero he was. He thought about Owen Grant's blood soaking into Afghan dirt while he made Caleb promise to watch over his daughter. I have conditions, he said. Relief flooded Amelia's face. Name them. First, I keep my same schedule. I still need to drop my daughter at school and be there when she gets home. Whatever hours I work have to accommodate that. Done. Second, I want full transparency. Access to all departments, all meetings, all records. If I'm going to help you understand what's really happening in your company, I need to see everything. Agreed. Third, when I tell you something you don't want to hear, you don't fire me. You might disagree with me, you might argue, but you don't punish honesty. That's non-negotiable. I understand. And fourth, Caleb pulled his hand back and looked her straight in the eye. The first priority isn't profit or image or even your father's legacy. It's the people at the bottom of your org chart, the ones making minimum wage and scared to take sick days. We fix their reality first, and everything else follows from that. If you can't commit to that, then this conversation ends here. Amelia didn't hesitate. That's exactly what I want to do. I just don't know how. That's what I'm for. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, the sense of a path opening up that he hadn't seen before. But you need to understand what you're committing to. Real change is expensive. It'll hit your profit margins. It'll make your shareholders unhappy. Some of your executives will fight you every step of the way, and some will quit rather than adapt. Are you ready for that? Are you asking if I'm willing to choose people over profit? I'm asking if you're willing to choose principles over comfort, because the road you're talking about walking isn't easy, and there's no turning back halfway through. Either you commit completely or you don't start at all. Amelia looked down at the dog tags around her neck, at the name stamped into stainless steel, her father's name, her family's name, a legacy that had been twisted into something unrecognizable. When she looked up again, her jaw was set with determination that would have made Owen Grant proud. My father died protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. He died believing that honor meant something, that sacrifice wasn't just a word we used in speeches. If I can't live up to that in a corporate boardroom where the worst thing that'll happen is I lose money, she shook her head, then I don't deserve to carry his name. All right then, Caleb extended his hand across the table. I'll take the job. But we do this right, or we don't do it at all. Amelia shook his hand firmly. When can you start? I need to call Lily's school and update my emergency contacts. Then I need to go home and put on the only decent shirt I own that doesn't have cleaning solution stains on it. He checked his watch. I can be at your office by noon. Perfect. I'll have HR draw up the paperwork. Amelia stood, then paused. Caleb, thank you for keeping your promise, for telling me the truth, for giving me a chance to do better. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see how much this is going to cost you. She smiled, a real smile. Not the calculated expression he'd seen in 18 months of watching her from a distance. My father used to say the most important things always cost more than you want to pay. I guess I'm about to learn what he meant. After she left, Caleb sat alone with his cooling coffee and thought about the strange trajectory his life had taken. 7 years ago, he'd been bleeding in the Afghan desert while a dying man made him promise to find his daughter. Yesterday, he'd been fired for keeping that promise. Today, he was about to become an executive at a major corporation despite being wildly unqualified on paper. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Lily forgot her lunch. Can you drop it off? Real life, asserting itself in the middle of impossible circumstances. Caleb smiled and typed back, on my way. He stopped by the apartment, grabbed Lily's lunchbox, she'd decorated it with stickers of cartoon characters he didn't recognize, and headed to her school. The building was old and underfunded, the kind of place that had been next on the list for renovations for the past decade. The teachers were dedicated but exhausted, trying to do impossible work with insufficient resources. Caleb signed in at the front office and waited while they called Lily down. She appeared a few minutes later, slightly out of breath from running. Daddy! She threw her arms around him. Mrs. Chen texted you about my lunch? She did. Here you go. He handed over the lunchbox. What do you have this afternoon? Art class. We're making collages about people who inspire us. I'm doing mine about you. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. But don't tell Mrs. Chen I'm using the gray colors. She still thinks heroes have to be bright. Your secret's safe with me. Caleb knelt down to her level. Hey, I have some news. Remember how I lost my job yesterday? Lily's face fell. Yeah. Well, I got a new one, a better one. It means I'll be able to pick you up from school every day like always, but it also means things are going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Because you kept your promise? Because I kept my promise. Lily hugged him tightly. I told you doing the right thing matters. You did. You were right. I'm an old soul, she said solemnly, making him laugh. On the way back downtown, Caleb called his old unit commander, the one who'd helped him navigate civilian life after Afghanistan. Tom, it's Caleb Reed. I need to run something by you. Caleb, haven't heard from you in months. What's going on? Remember that promise I told you about? The one to Owen Grant? The one where you were supposed to find his daughter and deliver his message? Yeah, I remember. You ever do that? Yesterday. It didn't go quite how I expected, but Caleb gave him the abbreviated version. The cracked phone, the dog tags, the confrontation, the firing, and now the unexpected job offer. Am I crazy for taking this? I'm not qualified to run anything. Tom was quiet for a moment. You remember that night outside Kandahar when our convoy got hit and the lieutenant froze? You're the one who took over, organized the defense, got everyone into cover, and held position until the cavalry arrived. You saved 11 lives that night, and you weren't qualified for any of that either. That was different. How? Leadership is leadership, whether you're under fire or in a boardroom. The principles don't change. Take care of your people, tell the truth, make the hard calls, and don't ask anyone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Tom's voice turned serious. Owen Grant chose you for a reason, Caleb. He saw something in you. Maybe it's time you started seeing it too. Or maybe I'm about to make a spectacular fool of myself. That too. But at least it'll be interesting, Tom laughed. Keep me posted. And Caleb, I'm proud of you, man. Not everyone keeps promises when they're expensive. By noon, Caleb was walking through the lobby of Grant & Company in his best shirt and the sport coat he'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago. He felt like an imposter, waiting for someone to realize the mistake and escort him back to his cleaning cart. But the security guard waved him through without question, and the elevator carried him smoothly to the executive floor. Jennifer Park looked up from her desk and did a double take. Mr. Reed? I have a meeting with Ms. Grant. Yes, she told me. Jennifer seemed to be searching for words. This is unexpected. Tell me about it. Amelia's office door opened and she emerged, back in her professional armor, but somehow wearing it differently than before. Caleb, come in. Jennifer, hold my calls for the next hour. The office was exactly what he'd expected. Expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, carefully curated art that probably cost more than a semester at a state university. But there was also something new. A small photo on her desk that hadn't been there before, showing a younger Amelia with a man in army uniform. Owen Grant, smiling at the camera with his arm around his daughter. I found that last night, Amelia said, following his gaze. Buried in a box I hadn't opened in 5 years. I'd forgotten we took it, forgotten that version of both of us existed. He looks happy. He was. I was about to graduate business school. He was so proud. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Before we get started, I want to show you something. She pulled up a document on her computer and turned the screen so he could see. It was an organizational chart, the kind that showed every layer of Grant & Company from CEO to entry-level positions. This is us. 3,200 employees. I've been running this company for 2 years and I couldn't tell you the names of 300 of them. That's not unusual, it's inexcusable. My father knew every person who worked for him when he was building this company. Every single one. She pointed to the bottom tier of the chart. This is where we start. I want to know who these people are, what they need, what we're doing wrong, and I want you to show me. That's going to take time. We have time. Amelia pulled out a folder. HR has your contract ready to sign. Director of Facility Operations, starting salary of $110,000, full benefits, company car if you want it. And before you argue that it's too much, it's actually below market for the position. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm paying you what the job is worth. Caleb looked at the number and felt dizzy. It was more money than he'd made in any 3 years combined. It was stability, security, the ability to give Lily things he'd only dreamed about before. It was also a responsibility he wasn't sure he could handle. What if I fail? He asked quietly. What if I take this job and it turns out I don't know what I'm doing? Then you'll be in good company, because I don't know what I'm doing either. Amelia's smile was self-deprecating. We'll figure it out together. That's what my father would have done. surrounded himself with people who told him the truth and trusted them to help him find the right path. Caleb picked up the pen and signed the contract before he could talk himself out of it. "All right," Amelia said, her voice taking on a more businesslike tone. "Where do we start?" "With the people you fired." Caleb met her eyes. "Every person who lost their job in the past 2 years because of cost-cutting or performance metrics or restructuring, we review every case and we find out which ones were unjust, and then we make it right." "That could be hundreds of people." "Then it's hundreds of people. Your father died for principle. The least we can do is rehire for it." Amelia took a deep breath and nodded. "Jennifer? Cancel my afternoon. Actually, cancel the rest of my week. Mr. Reed and I have work to do." The conference room on the executive floor had never seen anything like what happened over the next 4 days. Amelia and Caleb commandeered it completely, covering the walls with printouts, sticky notes, and handwritten lists that grew longer with each passing hour. Jennifer brought them coffee at regular intervals and stopped asking questions after the first day when she'd walked in to find the CEO of Grant & Company sitting on the floor surrounded by personnel files, her expensive shoes kicked off in the corner. "This one," Amelia said, holding up a folder. "Maria Santos, single mother of 3, worked in our packaging facility for 6 years, fired last March for excessive absences." She read further. "Her daughter had leukemia. She was missing work for chemotherapy appointments." Caleb took the file and scanned it quickly. The termination paperwork was coldly efficient, citing company policy about attendance requirements without any mention of extenuating circumstances. "Did anyone from HR talk to her about FMLA? About accommodations?" "If they did, it's not documented here." Amelia's voice was tight. "This is my signature on the termination approval. I signed off on firing a woman whose child had cancer because she was missing too much work to take care of her." "You didn't know the details." "I should have asked." She pulled out her phone. "What's her number?" "It's in the file, but Amelia..." Caleb watched as she dialed. "It's been 7 months. She might not want to hear from you." "Then she can tell me that herself." The phone rang 4 times before a cautious voice answered. "Hello? Ms. Santos? This is Amelia Grant from Grant & Company. I'm calling about your termination last March." Amelia's voice was steady, but there was something vulnerable in it, something that hadn't been there before. "I wanted to apologize personally and discuss bringing you back if you're interested." The silence on the other end lasted so long that Caleb thought the call had dropped. Then Maria Santos said, "Is this some kind of joke?" "No, ma'am, it's not a joke. I've been reviewing personnel decisions made under my watch, and your case was brought to my attention. You were fired for missing work to care for your daughter during cancer treatment. That was wrong. We should have supported you, not terminated you. You're 7 months too late." Maria's voice cracked. "I lost my health insurance the day you fired me. Lost my apartment 3 months later because I couldn't find another job that paid enough. My daughter finished treatment, thank God. But we're living with my sister now, all 4 of us in her 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm working 2 part-time jobs that together pay less than what I made at Granton." Amelia closed her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't feed my kids or pay for the medication my daughter still needs." Maria's voice turned hard. "Why are you really calling? You want me to sign something that says I won't sue you?" "No, I want to offer you your job back, with full back pay for the 7 months you lost. I want to restore your seniority and your benefits, retroactive to your termination date, so there's no gap in your health coverage. And I want to establish a new company policy that ensures what happened to you never happens to anyone else." Another long silence. "What's the catch?" "There's no catch. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I'm trying to make it right." "Why now? Why not 7 months ago when I was begging HR to reconsider?" Amelia glanced at Caleb, who was watching her carefully. "Because someone reminded me that my father wouldn't have made this mistake, and he wouldn't want me to let it stand." Maria's voice softened slightly. "Your father hired me personally back in 2017. He came through the facility one day, stopped at my station, asked my name and how I was doing. 2 weeks later, I got promoted to team lead because he remembered me and thought I showed initiative." She paused. "That was the kind of man he was. I cried when I heard he died." "So did I." Amelia's voice was barely audible. "Ms. Santos, I can't undo the past 7 months. but I can try to make the future better. Will you at least consider my offer? I need to think about it. Talk to my family. Of course, take all the time you need. My assistant Jennifer will send you the details in writing, and you can call her with any questions. Amelia rattled off the phone number. And Ms. Santos, your daughter, how is she doing now? She's in remission, still weak, still has a lot of recovery ahead, but the doctors say she's going to make it. I'm glad, truly. After the call ended, Amelia sat motionless for a long moment, the phone still pressed to her ear. There are 63 more files like that one, she said finally. 63 people whose lives I've damaged because I was too busy worrying about efficiency metrics to remember they were human beings. We'll call every one of them, Caleb said. We'll make every offer we can. Some of them won't come back. Some of them will tell you exactly what they think of you and hang up. But we keep trying. This is going to cost millions. The board is going to lose their minds. Then let them. You're the CEO. You're Owen Grant's daughter. You get to decide what this company stands for. Amelia looked at him with something like wonder. How do you do that? Stay calm when everything's falling apart? Practice. I spent a lot of time in places where falling apart meant people died. Caleb pulled another file from the stack. Besides, this isn't falling apart. This is building something that should have been built from the beginning. It just takes longer when you're also dismantling the mess first. They worked until well past midnight that first night, calling former employees, leaving messages, sending emails. Some people hung up immediately. Some listened but declined the offers. But a few, like Maria Santos, who called back 2 hours later to say she'd accept, said yes. Each acceptance felt like a small victory, like reclaiming territory that had been lost. The next morning, word had spread through the building. Caleb could feel the shift in energy as he walked the halls, could see it in the way people watched him and Amelia with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. The janitor who'd been fired on Tuesday was now the director of facility operations on Wednesday, and the CEO who'd terrorized her staff for 2 years was calling people to apologize. The cognitive dissonance was palpable. Mr. Reed? A young woman approached him nervously in the hallway outside the executive offices. I'm Rebecca from accounting. Can I talk to you for a minute? Of course. Rebecca glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Is it true that you and Ms. Grant are reviewing all the terminations from the past 2 years? It's true. There's someone you should know about. His name is David Chen, no relation to your neighbor, I assume. He was in IT, got fired 6 months ago for supposedly violating data security policies. She lowered her voice further. But that's not what really happened. He found evidence that one of the senior VPs was using company resources for his personal consulting business. When David reported it through proper channels, the VP got him fired instead, made up the security violation and had enough influence to make it stick. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. Do you have proof of this? I have emails. David sent them to me before they deleted his access, asked me to keep them safe in case he needed them for a lawsuit. He never filed, though, couldn't afford a lawyer. Rebecca pulled out her phone. I can forward them to you if you want. I probably should have done something sooner, but I was scared of losing my own job. I understand, and yes, please send them. Do you know how to reach David? I have his number. He's working at a computer repair shop now, making about a third of what he made here. She hesitated. Mr. Reed, what you and Ms. Grant are doing, it's giving people hope. We've been scared for so long, scared to speak up, scared to make mistakes, scared to be human. Maybe things are actually going to change. We're going to try, but we need people like you to help us, people who know where the problems are. Caleb pulled out one of his new business cards. Jennifer had insisted on ordering them immediately and handed it to Rebecca. If you see something wrong, something that goes against what you think this company should be, I want you to tell me. No retaliation, no consequences, just honest feedback. Rebecca took the card like it was something precious. My mom worked here back when your dad ran the company, she said to Amelia, who'd emerged from her office. She always said it was the best job she ever had, that Mr. Grant treated everyone with respect, from executives to janitors. She was heartbroken when he died, and even more heartbroken watching what the company became after. She looked directly at Amelia. She'd be really happy to know you're trying to bring that back. After Rebecca left, Amelia stood in the hallway staring at nothing. How many more are there? How many more Davids and Marias and people who got crushed because I was too arrogant to pay attention? Probably a lot, Caleb said honestly, but we're going to find them. And we're going to make it right. By Thursday afternoon, they'd contacted 47 former employees and received acceptances from 19. They'd also uncovered 3 additional cases of wrongful termination, like David Chen's, where people had been fired for challenging unethical behavior. Each discovery made Amelia's face a little paler, her determination a little fiercer. The emergency board meeting was called for Thursday evening. Richard Morton, the CFO, had insisted on it after hearing about the rehiring initiative. The board members filed into the conference room at 6 p.m. with expressions ranging from concerned to hostile. Caleb stood in the back corner, watching as Amelia took her place at the head of the table. I assume you've all seen the memo about recent personnel changes, Amelia began without preamble. I want to address your concerns directly. Concerns? Marcus Blackwell, one of the largest shareholders, leaned forward aggressively. Amelia, you've gone insane. You're talking about spending millions to rehire people we fired for cause. You've promoted a janitor to an executive position. You've canceled Valor Square, which was supposed to be a major PR win for us. What the hell is going on? I'm fixing mistakes that should never have been made. Mistakes? Blackwell's face reddened. Those terminations were strategic decisions approved by HR and legal. We cut underperforming staff to improve efficiency. That's basic business. We fired a woman whose daughter had cancer, Amelia said flatly. We fired a man who reported ethics violations. We fired dozens of people who made the crime of being human, of having sick children or medical emergencies or the audacity to question practices they knew were wrong. That's not business. That's cruelty. It's the real world, said Patricia Vance, who chaired the compensation committee. Companies can't function if they accommodate every employee's personal drama. We have shareholders to answer to, profits to maintain. My father built this company on the principle that profit and people aren't mutually exclusive, Amelia replied. He proved you could be successful while treating employees with dignity. We've strayed from that, and I'm bringing us back. Richard Morton spoke up, his tone more measured than the others. Amelia, I understand you're having an emotional response to your father's legacy, but you need to think practically. The market won't reward us for being compassionate. They'll punish us for reduced margins. Then let them punish us. I'd rather run a company worth respecting than one that's merely profitable. Amelia stood, placing her palms flat on the table. My father died protecting people he barely knew because he believed every life had equal value. I've spent 2 years running this company like people were disposable resources. That ends now. You can't make these decisions unilaterally, Blackwell said. We have a fiduciary responsibility, and I have a moral one. Amelia's voice cut through his objection. This is still the company my father built, still carries his name. I won't let it be a monument to everything he opposed. If you can't support that, you're welcome to sell your shares. The room erupted in argument. 3 board members talking over each other, demanding explanations, threatening votes of no confidence. Through it all, Amelia stood firm, and Caleb watched from his corner with growing respect. This was who Owen Grant had hoped his daughter would become, someone willing to take fire for her principles. Enough. The single word from Richard Morton silenced the room. He was the oldest member of the board, had known Owen Grant personally, carried enough respect that even Blackwell deferred to him. I worked with Owen for 23 years, built this company alongside him from a warehouse operation to what we are now. And I'll tell you something about the man. He would have done exactly what Amelia is doing. Richard, you can't seriously, Patricia began. I can, and I am. Richard looked at each board member in turn. Owen used to say that the true measure of a company wasn't its market cap, but whether its employees could look their children in the eye and be proud of where they worked. We've lost that. Amelia's trying to get it back. It might cost us in the short term, but companies built on exploitation always collapse eventually. Better to reform ourselves now than implode later. This is corporate suicide, Buka, Blackwell muttered. No, Caleb said quietly from his corner, speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to look at him. Corporate suicide is what you've been doing, burning through employees like disposable resources, creating a culture of fear, cutting corners on safety and ethics to squeeze out another percentage point of profit. You think that's sustainable? You think talented people want to work for companies that treat them like garbage? And you are? Blackwell's tone dripped contempt. Someone who was in Afghanistan when Captain Owen Grant died protecting people he didn't have to protect. Someone who watched him make the choice between personal safety and doing what was right, and who saw him choose right without hesitation. Caleb moved away from the wall. He asked me to watch over his daughter, to help her understand what really mattered. That's what I'm doing. If you have a problem with that, we can discuss it, but don't mistake compassion for weakness or ethics for naivety. The room went quiet. Blackwell stared at Caleb like he was trying to decide whether to be angry or intimidated, then apparently chose neither and looked away. I'm calling for a vote, Patricia said finally. All in favor of halting this rehiring initiative and the associated policy changes? 3 hands went up. Blackwell, Patricia, and one other board member, Caleb, didn't know. Opposed? 4 hands, including Richard's. The motion fails, Richard said with satisfaction. Amelia, you have the board's support. Narrow support, but support nonetheless. Just try not to bankrupt us in the process of finding your conscience. Thank you, Amelia said quietly. I know this isn't easy for any of you, but I promise you'll see results. Real, measurable improvement in employee satisfaction, retention, and productivity. Give me 6 months to prove it works. After the board members filed out, Amelia collapsed into her chair like someone had cut her strings. I thought I was going to throw up the entire time. You did well, Caleb said. Your father would have been proud. Would he? I spent 2 years doing everything he'd hate. 2 years. She looked up at him. How do I make up for that? One day at a time, one decision at a time, one person at a time. Caleb pulled out his phone. Speaking of which, I got a text from David Chen. He wants to meet tomorrow to discuss coming back. And Maria Santos called again. She wants to know if we can help relocate her family into better housing as part of the benefits package. Can we do that? We can if you authorize it. Company-assisted housing program for employees facing hardship. It's not unprecedented. Amelia nodded slowly. Do it. Whatever they need. And Caleb, thank you for speaking up in there. I know it wasn't your job to defend this to the board. Actually, it is my job. That's what you hired me for, to help you do the right thing even when it's hard. He checked his watch. I need to go pick up Lily from aftercare. Will you be okay? Go. Be with your daughter. I'll handle things here. Caleb found Lily in the school's art room, covered in paint and grinning. Daddy, look what I made. She held up a collage that took his breath away. In the center was a photograph she'd cut from somewhere, the iconic raising of the flag at Iwo Jima, but she'd pasted images around it of ordinary people doing ordinary work. A doctor, a teacher, a firefighter, a janitor with a cart. And across the top in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, heroes are everywhere. It's beautiful, he said honestly. What made you think of this? You did. You said heroes don't have to be bright and loud. They can be quiet. So I made a picture showing all the quiet heroes. She pointed to the janitor figure. That's you. And this is a soldier because you told me about the man who saved your life. And these are all the other people who help without everyone watching. Caleb knelt down and pulled her into a hug. I love it. And I love you. I love you too, Daddy. Did your new job go good today? It went very good. Hard, but good. That's what the best things are, Lily said with the wisdom of an old soul. Mrs. Chen says anything worth doing is worth doing even when it's hard. Mrs. Chen is very smart. On Friday morning, Caleb arrived at the office to find a small crowd gathered in the lobby. Former employees holding letters or printed emails, looking nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Maria Santos was there with her 3 children, the youngest clinging to her leg. David Chen stood near the back, talking quietly with a woman Caleb didn't recognize. Amelia emerged from the elevator and stopped when she saw them. For a moment, she looked terrified. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked forward. Thank you all for coming, she said, her voice carrying across the lobby. For those of you who don't know me personally, I'm Amelia Grant. My father founded this company, and I've been CEO for the past 2 years. During that time, I made decisions that hurt many of you. Decisions I deeply regret. The lobby was silent except for the ambient noise of the building's HVAC system. I can't undo what happened. I can't give you back the months of stress and uncertainty and hardship my choices caused. But I can tell you that things are changing. We're changing. And if you're willing to give us another chance, I promise you'll be treated with the respect and dignity you should have received from the beginning. A man near the front raised his hand tentatively. My name is James. You fired me 14 months ago for missing work after my son was born. Your HR policy didn't cover paternity leave, and when I took time anyway, I was terminated. I know, Amelia said. I read your file. We're implementing new family leave policies effective immediately. 6 weeks paid for any parent, regardless of gender, plus flexible scheduling for the first year of a child's life. It won't help you retroactively, but if you come back, you'll have those protections going forward. Why should we believe you? A woman called out. How do we know this isn't just PR, that you won't fire us again the next time profits dip? You don't know, Amelia admitted. I've broken your trust and I have to earn it back. That's going to take time, but I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. She pulled out her phone and pulled up something on the screen. I'm establishing a whistleblower fund, $5 million, managed by an independent third party. Any employee who reports unethical behavior or witnesses retaliation can access this fund for legal protection. If I fire someone unjustly, they have resources to fight back. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Caleb felt a spike of surprise. They hadn't discussed this, which meant Amelia had come up with it on her own. Additionally, Amelia continued, I'm restructuring executive compensation, starting with mine. I'm taking a 50% pay cut and redirecting that money into employee benefits and a hardship fund for situations like Maria's daughter's illness or James's paternity leave. My executive team will be strongly encouraged to do the same. That's corporate suicide, someone muttered, loud enough to hear. Maybe, Amelia said, or maybe it's finally building something sustainable. My father used to say that a company was only as strong as its weakest employee. If we're leaving people behind, we're not strong, we're hollow. I'm done running a hollow company. David Chen stepped forward. I want to come back, but I need to know what happened to the VP who got me fired. Is he still here? No, Amelia said firmly. He was asked to resign yesterday. We have documentation of his ethics violations and his retaliation against you. If you want to pursue legal action, the company will support you and cooperate fully with any investigation. David's eyebrows shot up. You fired a senior vice president? For me? For principal. You did the right thing by reporting him. You shouldn't have been punished for that. Amelia looked around at all of them. I can't promise everything will be perfect. We're going to make mistakes as we rebuild this culture. But I can promise that when we do make mistakes, we'll own them and fix them. That's the standard my father set. That's the standard I should have maintained. Maria Santos stepped forward, still holding her youngest child. Your father came to my daughter's hospital room once. Did you know that? When he heard she was sick, he visited during her first round of chemo, brought her books, and sat with her while I had to go to a meeting with the doctors. He said no child should face something like that alone. Tears streamed down Maria's face. He was a good man, and I think maybe you're trying to be like him now. I'm trying, Amelia whispered. God, I'm trying so hard. Then I'm coming back, and I'm going to help you build the kind of company he would have wanted. One by one, the others came forward. Not all of them. Some were too hurt, too angry, or had found better opportunities elsewhere. But enough to make a difference, enough to start the process of healing. By noon, Jennifer had processed 17 rehiring contracts. By evening, that number had climbed to 23. And the word continued to spread, not just through former employees, but current ones, who watched in amazement as their CEO did something that seemed impossible in modern corporate America. She admitted she was wrong and took concrete steps to fix it. That night, as Caleb was packing up to leave, Amelia appeared in his office doorway. He still wasn't used to having an office, let alone one with a door and a window view of the city. I wanted to show you something, she said, holding out her phone. It was a news article from a local business journal. Grant & Company CEO makes unprecedented move to rehire terminated employees. It hit the press, Caleb observed. How do you feel about that? Terrified? Exhilarated? Both. Amelia sat down across from him. Rebecca from accounting was right. People are starting to hope again. I can feel it in the building. It's like something that was frozen is starting to thaw. That's good. But you know this is just the beginning, right? The real work starts now, making sure the culture actually changes, that this isn't just a temporary burst of conscience that fades when it gets expensive or inconvenient. I know, that's why I need you to keep pushing me, keep challenging me when I slip back into old patterns. Amelia twisted the dog tag chain around her fingers. She was still wearing both tags, he noticed. My father died believing people mattered more than profits. I'm going to prove he was right, even if it costs me everything. It might, Caleb warned. Blackwell and his allies aren't going to give up. They'll wait for you to make a mistake and use it to push back. You need to be ready for that fight. I am, because now I know what I'm fighting for. She stood to leave, then paused. Caleb, thank you for keeping your promise, for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. Your father asked me to help you understand honor. That's what I'm doing. You're doing more than that. You're teaching me what it actually looks like in practice. She smiled. Get home to Lily. I'll see you Monday. After she left, Caleb sat alone in his office and looked out at the city lights spreading to the horizon. Somewhere in that vast darkness were 3,200 employees whose lives were about to change, for better or worse. Somewhere out there were people who would benefit from Amelia's transformation and others who would fight against it. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Mrs. Chen made dumplings. She saved you some. Are you coming home soon? He typed back. On my way now. On the train ride home, Caleb thought about Owen Grant bleeding out in Afghan dust, about promises made and kept, about the strange and winding path that had led from that moment to this one. He thought about his daughter's collage with its celebration of quiet heroes, about the difference between honor that needed applause and honor that simply was. And he thought about Amelia Grant, standing in her lobby apologizing to people she'd wronged, looking more like her father than she probably realized. Maybe, Caleb thought, maybe this was what redemption looked like. Not a single dramatic gesture, but 1,000 small choices, each one slightly better than the last, building towards something that might actually matter. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a number he didn't recognize. This is Richard Morton. I wanted you to know Owen would be grateful for what you're doing for his daughter. Thank you for keeping your word. Caleb stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight of 7 years finally begin to lift. He'd delivered the dog tags. He'd told the story. And now, against all odds, Amelia was actually listening. The promise wasn't finished, might never be truly finished, but it was on the right path. That would have to be enough. The weekend passed in a blur of normalcy that felt surreal after the intensity of the previous week. Caleb took Lily to the park on Saturday, where she insisted on showing him every leaf she found interesting and explaining in elaborate detail why each one was special. On Sunday, they did laundry at the laundromat down the street while she worked on homework, her tongue poking out in concentration as she practiced cursive letters that looked like small birds learning to fly. But even in these mundane moments, Caleb's mind kept drifting back to Grant & Company, to the files still waiting to be reviewed, to the cultural transformation that had barely begun. He thought about Owen Grant's last words, about honor being a quiet language, and wondered if he'd truly understood what that meant until now. Speaking that language wasn't a single conversation or dramatic gesture. It was showing up, day after day, doing the work even when nobody was watching. Monday morning arrived with the first real bite of November cold. Caleb dropped Lily at school and headed downtown, arriving at the office to find it transformed in subtle ways he was only beginning to notice. People made eye contact in the hallways now. The nervous energy that had pervaded every interaction seemed slightly less oppressive. In the break room, he heard actual laughter instead of the hushed, careful conversations that had been the norm. Jennifer was at her desk when he arrived, and she looked up with an expression somewhere between relief and anxiety. Mr. Reed, thank God. Ms. Grant has been in emergency meetings since 6 a.m. The board called another session, just Blackwell and his allies, but they're making noise about a vote of no confidence. Caleb felt his stomach tighten. Where is she now? Executive conference room. She asked me to send you in as soon as you arrived. Jennifer lowered her voice. They've been in there for 2 hours. I've never seen her look this rattled. Caleb headed down the hallway, his footsteps silent on carpet that he used to clean every Thursday. The conference room door was closed, but not locked. He knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. The scene inside was tense enough to choke on. Amelia sat at the head of the table, her face pale, but composed. Across from her, Marcus Blackwell leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of a predator who'd cornered his prey. Patricia Vance and 2 other board members flanked him, their expressions varying shades of hostile. Ah, the janitor, Blackwell said when Caleb entered. Perfect timing. We were just discussing how your little social experiment is already costing us. What happened? Caleb directed the question to Amelia, ignoring Blackwell entirely. Sterling Manufacturing, Amelia said quietly. They were our 3rd largest client, worth about $18 million annually. They've just terminated their contract. Let me guess, Caleb said, pulling out a chair and sitting down uninvited. They cited concerns about our recent policy changes affecting our reliability? Blackwell's eyes narrowed. How did you know that? Because Sterling's CEO is Jackson Sterling Jr., who's made headlines for union-busting and fighting minimum wage increases. A company that treats employees with dignity threatens his entire business model. Of course, he'd cut ties. Caleb looked at Amelia. Did he give a stated reason? He said our instability and unpredictable management decisions made us an unreliable partner. Amelia's voice was steady, but there was strain underneath. He also suggested that our new bleeding heart policies would inevitably compromise our efficiency. See? Blackwell gestured triumphantly. This is exactly what we warned you about. The market doesn't reward compassion. It punishes it. Sterling was just the first. How many other clients are going to follow once word spreads that we're more concerned with employee feelings than delivering results? Sterling was a toxic client anyway, Caleb said. I've seen the contract files. They demanded overtime from our staff without proper compensation, insisted on turnaround times that required people to skip breaks, and threw tantrums when we enforced basic labor standards. Losing them isn't a loss. It's addition by subtraction. $18 million is addition by subtraction? Patricia's voice dripped sarcasm. What kind of business logic is that? The kind that looks past quarterly earnings to long-term sustainability. Sterling was profitable, but at what cost? How many of our employees burned out trying to meet their unreasonable demands? How much turnover did their account generate? How many workers' comp claims came from people pushing too hard for too long? Caleb pulled out his phone and scrolled through notes he'd compiled over the weekend. I did some research. In the 2 years we've had Sterling's contract, the departments servicing their account have had turnover rates 40% higher than company average. Workers' comp claims up 63%, stress-related absences up 71%. We were bleeding money, and people trying to keep them happy. Blackwell waved this away dismissively. Those are acceptable costs of doing business with major clients. You manage the personnel issues and maintain the relationships. You burn through human beings like kindling and call it management strategy, Caleb corrected. That's not sustainable. Eventually, you run out of people willing to be destroyed for your profit margins. This is insane, one of the other board members said. Thompson, Caleb thought his name was. We're sitting here listening to a janitor lecture us about business strategy like he has any idea what he's talking about. Former janitor, Caleb said mildly. Current director of facility operations. And before that, private security contractor who managed logistics for operations worth millions of dollars under combat conditions. So yes, I have some idea what I'm talking about. Caleb's right about Sterling, Amelia said, finding her voice again. I've been reviewing the full cost analysis. When you factor in turnover, training replacement staff, workers' comp, and reduced efficiency from exhausted employees, Sterling was barely profitable. We were sacrificing long-term stability for short-term revenue. And now we're sacrificing short-term revenue for a long-term gamble that might not pay off, Blackwell shot back. Amelia, I say this with respect for your father's memory. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. This whole rehiring initiative, the policy changes, the pay cuts, it's all an emotional response to guilt over Owen's death. You need to separate personal feelings from business decisions. My father's death isn't why I'm doing this, Amelia said, and there was steel in her voice now. My father's life is. He built this company on principles that worked, that created a profitable, sustainable business with loyal employees and satisfied clients. We abandoned those principles and look where it got us, hated by our staff, dependent on toxic clients like Sterling, one PR disaster away from collapse. I'm not being emotional. I'm being smart. You're being naive, Patricia said. The business world has changed since your father's time. Modern markets demand efficiency. Shareholders expect maximum returns. You can't compete while coddling employees. Then maybe we need different shareholders, Amelia replied. Ones who understand that a company is more than a wealth extraction machine. Ones who remember that sustainable success requires treating people like people. Blackwell stood abruptly. This is pointless. Amelia, we're calling for a full board vote in 2 weeks, a formal evaluation of your performance as CEO, and a decision on whether you're fit to continue in that role. If you persist with these policies, if you continue prioritizing sentiment over strategy, we will remove you. Your father may have founded this company, but you don't have the authority to destroy it. Then I guess we'll find out in 2 weeks which of us the board supports, Amelia said quietly. I'm not backing down, Marcus. Not on this. Blackwell and his allies filed out, leaving Amelia and Caleb alone in the suddenly silent conference room. She sat motionless for a long moment, then dropped her head into her hands. I'm going to lose, she said, her voice muffled. They'll vote me out and install someone who'll undo everything we've started. Maybe, Caleb acknowledged. Or maybe you'll win. Either way, you're doing the right thing. The right thing that cost me my company? It was never really yours if you had to compromise your principles to keep it. Caleb moved to sit beside her. Owen Grant died doing the right thing when the easy thing would have been staying in cover. You think he regretted that choice in his final moments? You think he wished he'd been more pragmatic, more focused on self-preservation? Of course not. He died a hero. He died as himself, living according to his values, even when it cost him everything. Caleb's voice softened. That's what he wanted for you, Amelia. Not to be a hero, just to be someone who could look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. Can you do that now? After these past 2 weeks? Amelia looked up, her eyes wet. Yes, for the first time in years, yes. Then you've already won what matters. The board vote is just logistics. A knock on the door interrupted them. Jennifer poked her head in, looking apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see both of you. Says it's urgent. The visitor turned out to be Maria Santos, and she wasn't alone. She'd brought 5 other people, all former employees who'd been rehired in the past week. They stood in the lobby looking nervous but determined, and when Amelia and Caleb approached, Maria stepped forward. We heard about Sterling, she said without preamble. Word travels fast among the staff. We know the board is giving you trouble over the changes you're making. News travels even faster than I thought, Amelia said with a weak smile. Yes, we're facing some resistance. We want to help, Maria gestured to the others. All of us. We've been talking, the people you brought back, and we want to do something. We want to show the board and the clients and everyone else that treating employees right isn't a weakness. It's a strength. I appreciate that, Maria, but I'm not sure what you could... We can work, one of the men interrupted. His name was James, the one who'd been fired over paternity leave. We can show results. Give us Sterling's workload, and we'll handle it better than they were getting before. Let us prove that happy employees are productive employees. Sterling terminated their contract, Caleb said gently. There's no workload to handle. Then we'll find new clients, better clients. Maria's voice was fierce with determination. Ms. Grant, you gave us our jobs back when you didn't have to. You admitted you were wrong and you're trying to fix it. That means something. That means everything. Let us fight for this company the way you're fighting for us. Amelia looked at them. 5 people who should have been bitter and resentful, who'd lost months of income and stability because of her decisions, now standing in her lobby offering to help. The emotion that crossed her face was complicated and raw. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll let us try, James said. Say you'll give us a chance to show what people can do when they're treated with respect. All right. Amelia's voice grew stronger. Yes. Caleb and I will meet with you this afternoon. We'll figure out how to channel this energy into something concrete. And thank you, truly. After they left, Amelia turned to Caleb with wonder in her eyes. Did that just happen? Did people we fired just volunteer to help save the company? They're not helping save the company. They're helping save what it could be. Caleb checked his watch. We've got 4 hours until that meeting. I suggest we use them to figure out exactly what we're building here. They spent those 4 hours doing something Amelia admitted she'd never done before, actually talking to employees at every level of the organization. Not formal surveys or structured interviews, but real conversations. They visited the mailroom and the loading dock, the IT department, and the customer service floor. Everywhere they went, Caleb asked the same questions. What's working? What's broken? What would you fix if you could? The answers were illuminating and heartbreaking in equal measure. People were desperate to be heard, to have their expertise valued, to feel like they mattered. And they had ideas. God, they had so many ideas. Solutions to problems management didn't even know existed, efficiencies that could save thousands of dollars, improvements that could enhance both productivity and quality of life. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? Amelia asked after their 6th conversation, this one with a customer service representative who'd outlined a simple software change that would cut call handling time by 30%. Because you never asked, Caleb said simply. And because when people tried to suggest improvements, they were usually shut down or ignored. After a while, they learned to stop trying. We're going to change that. Today. Amelia pulled out her phone and called Jennifer. Clear my calendar for the rest of the week. Set up an open forum. Call it a listening session. Every employee who wants to share feedback or suggestions gets 15 minutes of my time. First come, first served. Ms. Grant, that could be hundreds of people, Jennifer protested. Then I guess I'll be here late. Make it happen. By the time they met with Maria's group that afternoon, Caleb and Amelia had filled 3 notebooks with employee suggestions and identified at least a dozen immediate improvements they could implement. The meeting took place in a mid-sized conference room, and the energy was electric with possibility. Here's what we're thinking, Amelia began, after everyone had settled in. Sterling's departure leaves a gap in our revenue, yes, but it also creates an opportunity. We can be selective about who we replace them with. We can actively seek out clients who share our values, companies that treat their own employees well, that prioritize sustainability over exploitation, that want partners instead of servants. That's a nice idea, David Chen said carefully. But will those companies pay as much as Sterling did? Maybe not initially, Caleb admitted, but they'll be more reliable long-term, lower maintenance, less likely to make unreasonable demands that burn out our staff. And here's the thing, companies with good cultures tend to be more successful long-term. They're the kind of clients worth having. So how do we find them? Maria asked. We start by leveraging our own story, Amelia said. What we're doing here, the policy changes, the rehiring initiative, the cultural transformation, that's newsworthy. Companies that care about ethics will see us as potential partners who share their values. We're not hiding what we're doing. We're using it as a differentiator. Over the next 2 hours, they hammered out a strategy. Maria would lead a team reaching out to potential clients, specifically targeting companies with strong employee satisfaction ratings and ethical business practices. James would work with HR to document the improvements in turnover and productivity they were already seeing from the policy changes. David would create a digital platform for employees to submit suggestions and track their implementation, turning good ideas into measurable results. This is going to require all of us working together, Amelia said as the meeting wound down. Management and staff, executives and line workers. No more hierarchy where good ideas only count if they come from people with fancy titles. We're all in this together. My father used to say that, a quiet voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Richard Morton standing there, leaning on his cane. Owen used to say a company was like a body. Every part matters, from the brain to the hands to the feet. You can't function if you're only paying attention to one piece. Richard, Amelia stood. I didn't know you were here. I came to check on you after this morning's ambush. Richard moved into the room slowly, his age showing in the careful way he navigated. I wanted to make sure Blackwell hadn't crushed your spirit. He tried, but I had help. Amelia gestured to the people around the table. Richard looked at them each in turn, then smiled. Owen would love this. You know what he always said was his proudest moment? What? There was a year, 2009, I think, when we almost went under. Financial crisis hit us hard. We were looking at massive layoffs, maybe even bankruptcy. Owen called an all-hands meeting and laid out the situation honestly. Told everyone we had two choices, cut staff by 40%, or everyone takes a 20% pay cut to keep all jobs intact. He put it to a vote. Richard's eyes grew distant with memory. Every single person voted for the pay cut. Every one. They chose to sacrifice their own income rather than see their colleagues lose their jobs. Owen cried during that meeting. Grown man, decorated veteran, CEO of a major company, standing there with tears running down his face because he was so proud of what people chose. The room was completely silent. That's the company he built, Richard continued. One where people cared about each other, where loyalty went both ways, where doing right mattered more than doing well. You're building that again, Amelia, and it scares the hell out of people like Blackwell because it shows there's another way, a better way. Will it be enough, Amelia asked, to convince the board, to win the vote? I don't know. But I know this. Owen didn't die wondering if doing the right thing would work out in his favor. He died knowing he'd done what his conscience demanded. That's the only certainty any of us gets. Richard gripped his cane and straightened. Fight for this. Fight hard. I'll do everything I can to help. But even if you lose the vote, you'll have won something more important. After he left, the group sat in contemplative silence until Maria spoke up. We're not going to lose. We're going to fight, and we're going to win, because we're fighting for something that actually matters. Damn right, James agreed. When's this board vote? 2 weeks from today, Amelia said. Then we've got 2 weeks to prove them wrong, to show concrete results from treating people right. Let's get to work. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of Caleb's life, and he'd survived firefights in Afghanistan. The listening sessions Amelia had initiated became a tidal wave of employee engagement. People lined up for hours to share their insights, their grievances, their ideas for improvement. Some conversations were difficult. There was anger and pain that needed to be acknowledged. But more were hopeful, energizing, full of the kind of innovation that comes when people feel genuinely heard. Maria's outreach team made contact with 17 potential clients in the first week. By the end of the second week, they'd secured meetings with 7 and signed preliminary agreements with 3. The contracts weren't as large as Sterling's had been, but they were solid, ethical companies that treated their own employees well and expected the same from partners. The productivity metrics were even more dramatic. Turnover in the departments where rehired employees had returned dropped by 47%. Workers' comp claims fell by 32%. And perhaps most surprisingly, efficiency actually improved. When people weren't exhausted and scared, they worked better. Caleb documented everything meticulously, building a case that could counter Blackwell's arguments with hard data. But he also did something else. He started recording the stories. Video testimonials from employees about how the changes had affected their lives. Maria talking about being able to afford an apartment for her family again. James describing what it meant to have been at his son's birth without fear of losing his job. David explaining how being vindicated after wrongful termination had restored his faith in justice. The night before the board vote, Caleb worked until nearly midnight putting together a presentation that told the story in numbers and narratives. When he finally got home, Lily was asleep, but Mrs. Chen was waiting up. "Big day tomorrow?" she asked in her gentle, accented English. "Very big. Could change everything." "You'll do fine. You're a good man, like soldier who saved your life. Same heart." She patted his arm. "Lily made you something on table." Caleb found it waiting for him. Another drawing, this one showing 2 figures side by side. One wore a military uniform, the other a suit and tie. Between them was a heart, and above it Lily had written, "Heroes help each other." He stood there looking at it for a long time, thinking about Owen Grant's last words, about promises kept and battles fought, about his daughter's uncanny ability to see straight to the heart of things. Then he texted Amelia, "Ready for tomorrow?" Her response came immediately, "Terrified, but ready. Your father would be proud." "I'm proud. Thank you for everything, for keeping your promise even when I made it impossible, for not giving up." "That's what honor looks like," Caleb typed back. "See you tomorrow." The boardroom was packed when they arrived the next morning. All 12 board members were present, plus several major shareholders who'd demanded to attend. Richard Morton sat near the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral. Blackwell wore the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. Amelia stood at the head of the table, and Caleb could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers worried the dog tag chain she still wore. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "Thank you all for being here. I know there are concerns about the direction I've taken this company in recent weeks. I'd like to address those concerns directly." She nodded to Caleb, who pulled up the first slide of their presentation. For the next 45 minutes, they laid it all out. The numbers showing improved productivity and reduced turnover. The testimonials from employees and new clients. The cost-benefit analysis proving that ethical treatment of workers wasn't just moral, but profitable. The projections showing where they'd be in 6 months, a year, 5 years, if they stayed this course. "You're gambling with this company's future," Blackwell said when they'd finished. "These results are preliminary. 2 weeks isn't enough time to establish trends. You're asking us to bet everything on a philosophy that might sound nice but hasn't proven sustainable." "No," Amelia said firmly. "I'm asking you to bet on people, on the idea that treating employees with dignity creates better outcomes for everyone, workers, management, shareholders. My father built a successful company on that principle. We abandoned it and became hollowed out, dependent on toxic clients and burning through staff. I'm trying to rebuild what should never have been destroyed." "Sentiment doesn't pay dividends," Patricia said. "Neither does high turnover and reputational damage," Richard interjected. "I've run the numbers independently. Amelia's approach is actually more financially sound than what we've been doing. We were chasing short-term gains while creating long-term instability." "With all due respect, Richard, you're biased by your friendship with Owen," Blackwell said. "And you're biased by your investment portfolio," Richard shot back. "You want maximum short-term returns because you're planning to sell your shares in the next 2 years. You don't care about long-term sustainability because you won't be here to see the consequences." The room erupted in argument. Accusations flew back and forth, voices rising as board members chose sides. Through it all, Amelia stood silent at the head of the table, and Caleb saw something remarkable happen. Her fear transformed into certainty. Her doubt became conviction. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd done the right thing. "Enough," she said quietly, but somehow the word cut through the chaos. "Let's vote. Either you support this direction or you don't. Either you believe in building something sustainable or you don't. Either you trust me to lead this company according to my father's principles, or you remove me and find someone who will sacrifice those principles for quarterly earnings. Vote." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Richard raised his hand. "I vote to support Amelia's continued leadership and the current policy direction." 3 other hands went up immediately. Then a 5th, hesitant but firm. That made 5 out of 12. Blackwell's hand shot up in opposition, followed by Patricia's and 2 others. 4 against. 3 board members remained, Thompson and 2 others Caleb didn't know well. They looked at each other, looked at the data still displayed on the screen, looked at Amelia standing resolute at the head of the table. Thompson cleared his throat. "I came here today prepared to vote against you, Amelia. I thought you'd lost your mind, let grief cloud your judgment. But these numbers," he gestured at the presentation. "And more than that, the energy in this building. I've been on this board for 8 years and I've never seen employees actually enthusiastic about the company they work for. That has value, real value." His hand went up. "I support continued current leadership." The remaining 2 board members looked at each other one more time. Then, almost in unison, they raised their hands, 7-4. Amelia had won. The relief that crashed through Caleb was so intense he actually felt dizzy. Beside him, Amelia swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. Richard was smiling broadly, while Blackwell looked like he'd swallowed something toxic. "This isn't over," Blackwell said, standing abruptly. If results don't continue, if profitability drops, we'll revisit this decision. Fair enough, Amelia said. But Marcus? Maybe you should consider whether this company is right for you anymore. If you truly believe profit and principle are mutually exclusive, there are plenty of other places that share that philosophy. You don't have to stay somewhere you fundamentally disagree with the mission. It was a polite way of telling him to leave, and everyone in the room knew it. Blackwell's face reddened, but he simply gathered his papers and walked out, Patricia trailing behind him. After the board members dispersed, Amelia collapsed into a chair, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. We won. Oh my God, we actually won. You won, Caleb corrected. You stood up for what you believed in and convinced enough people it was worth fighting for. We won, Amelia insisted. None of this happens without you, without the promise you kept, the truth you told, the way you've guided me through this transformation. Richard approached, leaning heavily on his cane. Owen would be so proud of you both. This is the company he dreamed of, not just profitable, but meaningful, worth more than the sum of its revenue streams. Richard, thank you, Amelia stood and hugged him, for supporting me even when it was risky. Supporting you wasn't risky, it was right, he smiled. Now comes the hard part, actually delivering on these promises, proving that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive. We will, Amelia said with conviction, whatever it takes. Later that afternoon, as word spread through the building about the board vote, something spontaneous and unexpected happened. Employees started gathering in the lobby, not to protest or demand anything, but simply to celebrate. Someone brought cupcakes from the bakery down the street. Someone else started playing music from their phone, and gradually, impossibly, a party formed. Amelia and Caleb came down from the executive floor to find hundreds of people smiling, laughing, actually enjoying being at work. Maria saw them and started clapping. Others joined in until the entire lobby was filled with applause. Speech, someone called out. Others took up the cry. Speech, speech. Amelia looked terrified. Caleb nudged her forward gently. Tell them the truth. She stepped forward and the crowd quieted. I don't really know what to say except thank you. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for believing that this company could be better, for proving that treating people with dignity isn't weakness, it's strength. Her voice caught. My father built something beautiful here, and I almost destroyed it. But you, all of you, you're helping me build it back. Not the way it was, but the way it should have been all along. So thank you for your patience, your ideas, your willingness to fight for something that matters. To Grant and Company, someone shouted. The way it should be. The cheer that went up rattled the windows. Caleb stood at the edge of the crowd, watching it all, and felt his phone buzz. A text from Lily. Did you win your big meeting? He typed back. Yes, we won. I knew you would. Heroes always win when they're fighting for good things. Caleb smiled and looked around at the celebration, at the company transforming before his eyes, at Amelia laughing genuinely for the first time since he'd met her. Not always, he typed back, but sometimes, when it matters most. 3 months later, winter had settled over Chicago with the kind of cold that made your bones ache and your breath visible in crystalline clouds. But inside Grant and Company, something else was settling, a sense of permanence, of transformation that had taken root deeply enough to survive storms. Caleb stood in what used to be an underutilized storage room on the ground floor and was now being converted into something entirely different. The space was large and filled with morning light from windows that had been cleaned for the first time in years. Workers were installing comfortable chairs, tables at various heights, and a small kitchenette in the corner. What do you think? Amelia asked from beside him. She'd gotten into the habit of seeking his opinion on everything, which still felt surreal sometimes. Too much? Not enough? It's perfect, Caleb said honestly. The room was being transformed into a dedicated family space, somewhere employees could bring children who were too sick for school but not sick enough for the hospital, where nursing mothers could have privacy and comfort, where people facing emergencies could have a quiet place to make difficult phone calls without the entire office listening in. Maria suggested it, Amelia said. She said when her daughter was going through treatment, the hardest part was feeling like she had to choose between being a good mother and being a good employee. This way, maybe other people won't have to make that choice. The door opened and Maria herself walked in, followed by David Chen and James. They'd become informal leaders of what was now being called the Culture Committee, a group of employees from every level who met weekly to identify problems and propose solutions. Caleb had learned more about the actual functioning of Grant & Company from these meetings than from any management report. "The furniture arrives tomorrow," Maria announced, "and we've got 12 volunteers willing to staff the room on rotating schedules, providing childcare, or just being present if someone needs help. All volunteer hours counted as professional development for their personnel files." "That's incredibly generous," Amelia said. "That's what happens when people actually care about where they work," James replied with a grin. "Novel concept, I know." David pulled out his tablet. "I've got the latest numbers from the suggestion platform. We've implemented 47 employee ideas in the past 3 months. Average time from submission to implementation is 11 days. Employee engagement scores are up 62%. Voluntary turnover is down to almost nothing. We've lost 3 people in 3 months, and 2 of those were retirements that had been planned for years." "What about revenue?" Amelia asked. It was the question she asked less frequently now, but still needed answering. The board, minus Blackwell and Patricia, who'd both resigned in December, required quarterly updates showing that compassion wasn't coming at the cost of competence. "Up 18%, David said with satisfaction. "Turns out when people aren't exhausted and miserable, they work better." "Who knew?" "And the new clients?" Caleb asked. "Expanding. We've signed 8 more companies in the past month alone, all drawn by our reputation. There's actually a waiting list now of businesses that want to partner with us specifically because of how we treat our employees." Maria shook her head in wonder. 6 months ago, we were dependent on toxic clients like Sterling. Now we're turning down work because we have more opportunities than capacity." "Then we need to hire more people," Amelia said immediately. "Put together a recruitment plan that emphasizes our culture. Let's attract people who want to work somewhere that values them." "Already done," James said. "HR posted openings last week. We've had over 300 applications for 15 positions. People are literally competing to work here." Caleb caught Amelia's eye and saw the emotion there. Pride, relief, and something deeper. The vindication of believing that doing right and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. The proof that her father's principles weren't naive idealism, but practical wisdom. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Voices raised not in anger, but excitement, and then Jennifer appeared in the doorway looking flustered and thrilled in equal measure. "Ms. Grant, you need to see this, right now." They followed her to the lobby, where a crowd had gathered around the television mounted on the wall. It was tuned to a national business news channel, and the headline scrolling across the bottom made Caleb's breath catch. "Grant & Company, the revolutionary business model that's changing corporate culture." The segment was already underway, showing footage of their building, interviews with employees, charts displaying their improved metrics. The anchor was speaking with genuine enthusiasm rather than the cynicism that usually colored corporate coverage. "What we're seeing here is something remarkable," the anchor said. "A mid-sized company that decided to prioritize people over profit and discovered that doing so actually increased profit. Since implementing comprehensive family leave policies, worker support programs, and radical transparency, Grant & Company has seen productivity increase by 23%, turnover decrease by 70%, and revenue grow by nearly 20%. Other companies are taking notice." The screen cut to an interview with a business professor from Northwestern. The Grant & model, as it's being called, challenges fundamental assumptions about corporate efficiency. "We've been operating under the belief that you have to squeeze workers to extract maximum value. Granton is proving the opposite, that investing in worker well-being creates value. It's not just feel-good policy, it's sound business strategy." "How did they—" Amelia started. "I may have sent our data to a few journalists," David said sheepishly. "Figured if we're going to revolutionize corporate culture, we might as well let people know about it." The segment continued, showing more footage, more interviews. And then Amelia appeared on screen from an interview Caleb hadn't even known she'd given. She was sitting in her office, the photograph of her and her father visible on the desk behind her. "My father built this company on the principle that people aren't resources to be exploited. They're the actual foundation of any successful enterprise," she was saying on the television. "I forgot that for a while. Got caught up in metrics and margins and forgot that every number on a spreadsheet represents a human being with a family, with struggles, with dignity that deserves respect. Remembering that didn't make us weaker. It made us stronger. The interviewer's voice came from off camera. Some critics say this model isn't scalable, that it only works for smaller companies. What do you say to that? I say they're making excuses, Amelia replied. Yes, it requires actual effort. Yes, it means accepting smaller profit margins in exchange for sustainability. Yes, it demands that leadership actually knows and cares about the people who work for them. But none of that is impossible. It's just harder than exploitation, and we've gotten lazy. We've accepted that cruelty is efficient when really it's just convenient. Strong words. My father died protecting people he'd only known for weeks because he believed every life had equal value. The least I can do is run a company that operates on the same principle. Amelia's voice was steady and certain. If we can't be decent to the people who make our success possible, we don't deserve that success. The lobby erupted in applause when the segment ended. People were crying, hugging, celebrating this public validation of what they'd been building together. Caleb watched Amelia's face as she took it in. The genuine affection of people who'd once feared her. The transformation of a company that had been dying from the inside out. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. I hope so. She touched the dog tags around her neck. She'd never stopped wearing them. I finally feel like I'm speaking the language he tried to teach me. The quiet one, where actions matter more than applause. Except you're getting applause anyway. That's just a side effect. Amelia smiled. The real reward is this. She gestured at the celebrating employees. Knowing they're not afraid anymore, knowing they can bring their whole selves to work without fear of being crushed for it. Later that evening, after the excitement had died down and most people had gone home, Caleb found himself back in his office staring at the files he'd kept for so long. The recordings and documents from his 18 months as a janitor, the evidence of all the things that had been wrong. He'd never needed to use them. Never needed to expose Grant & Company's failures from the outside because Amelia had been willing to confront them from within. His phone rang. Tom, his old unit commander. I just saw you on national news, Tom said without preamble. The janitor who became an executive and helped transform a company. That's wild, man. It's been a strange year, Caleb admitted. Owen Grant would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. You kept your promise in a bigger way than either of you probably imagined. Tom paused. You're doing good work, Caleb, important work. Proving that doing right isn't just moral, it's practical. I had help. Amelia did the hard part. You both did. That's how this stuff works. Nobody changes the world alone. Tom's voice turned more serious. How's Lily? Good. Great, actually. The new salary means I can afford better after-school programs. A tutor for math, the art classes she's been wanting. She's thriving. Good. That's what matters. That little girl having her dad present and providing for her. Tom laughed. Owen's promise led you somewhere good. After they hung up, Caleb sat in his office looking out at the Chicago skyline. Lights were coming on across the city as evening settled in, millions of people in their own struggles and triumphs. He thought about the strange path that had brought him here, from Afghan battlefields to janitorial closets to executive offices. About promises made and kept, about honor being a quiet language that spoke through actions rather than words. His computer dinged with an email. The subject line read, From Kandahar with gratitude. Caleb opened it carefully. It was from someone named Hassan Ahmed, and the message was brief. I was an interpreter with Captain Grant's unit. I heard about what you are doing for his daughter and his company. He saved my life twice and my family's life once. Thank you for keeping his memory alive in the right way. Thank you for remembering that he believed people mattered. I am in Virginia now with my family, safe because of him. We light candles for him every year on the anniversary. Your work honors him more than any statue could. Caleb read the email 3 times, feeling the weight of connection across years and continents. Owen Grant's impact rippling outward in ways that could never be fully measured. Lives saved and changed, principles lived and taught, a legacy that was still unfolding. He forwarded the email to Amelia with a simple note. Thought you should see this. Her response came within minutes. Come to my office? He found her standing at her windows, looking out at the same city he'd been contemplating. The dog tags caught the light from her desk lamp, and her face was wet with tears. I never knew, she said when he entered. I knew my father died in Afghanistan. I knew it was in combat. But I never knew the details. Never knew about Hassan or the others he saved. Never understood the scope of who he was beyond my father. She turned to face Caleb. You gave me that. Not just the dog tags or the story of his death, but the understanding of his life, of what he believed and how he lived it. He wanted you to know. That's why he made me promise. Do you think he knew? That telling me about his death would teach me how to live? Amelia's voice was wondering. That making you watch over me would lead to all of this? I think he knew you had it in you to be extraordinary. He just wanted to make sure someone reminded you when you'd forgotten. Caleb moved to stand beside her at the window. You've done that, Amelia. You've become someone he'd recognize, someone he'd be proud of. We've done it. You and me and everyone who believed this was possible. She was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next. The board wants expansion plans. I know, and I have them, but I also have something else. Amelia turned to face him fully. I want to establish the Owen Grant Foundation, a nonprofit that helps companies implement the kind of changes we've made here, that teaches the principles my father lived by, that profit and people aren't enemies, that treating employees with dignity creates better outcomes, that honor is something you practice, not something you perform. That's ambitious. My father died for his principles. I can live for them. She smiled. And I want you to run it. You understand these principles at a level I'm still learning. You've proven you can translate military leadership experience into corporate transformation. You're the right person for this. Caleb felt his heart skip. Amelia, I'm barely qualified to do my current job. Running a foundation, you kept a 7-year promise at great personal cost. You transformed a dying company culture by telling uncomfortable truths. You've shown more leadership in 1 year than most executives show in their entire careers. Her voice was firm. My father chose you to watch over me. I'm choosing you to help spread what we've built here. Please. I need to think about it. Talk to Lily. This would be a big change. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Caleb, you've already proven you're capable of extraordinary things. Don't let imposter syndrome talk you out of doing more. That night, Caleb sat with Lily at their kitchen table while she worked on homework. Their apartment was the same one they'd lived in for 3 years, though he could afford better now. But Lily loved her school, loved Mrs. Chen downstairs, loved the neighborhood where she'd made friends. Some things were worth more than upgrades. Daddy, what's a legacy? Lily asked suddenly, looking up from her workbook. A legacy? Where'd you hear that word? Social studies. We're learning about people who change things. The teacher says a legacy is what you leave behind after you're gone, what people remember about you. Caleb thought about Owen Grant bleeding out in Afghan dust, about the interpreter safe in Virginia, about the company being rebuilt on principles that had seemed old-fashioned. A legacy is the difference you make that keeps mattering after you're not around anymore. It's the good you do that other people carry forward. Like the soldier who saved you? Is his legacy that he made you promise to help his daughter and that promise made lots of things better? Exactly like that. Lily chewed on her pencil thoughtfully. What's your legacy going to be? I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out. I think it's going to be about keeping promises and helping people be better. She said it with absolute certainty. That's what you're good at. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds, Caleb thought. Ms. Grant offered me a new job today, running a foundation that teaches companies how to treat people right. It would mean more responsibility, more travel, more time away from you. But you'd be helping people? Yes. Then you should do it. Lily returned to her homework like the matter was settled. That's what heroes do. They help people even when it's hard. The next morning, Caleb called Amelia before heading to the office. I'll do it. I'll run the foundation, but I have conditions. Name them. First, I still prioritize Lily. She comes first, always. If there's a conflict between foundation work and being present for my daughter, she wins. Agreed. That's non-negotiable. Second, we do this right. No cutting corners, no compromising principles for convenience or optics. If we're teaching companies how to treat people well, we have to live those standards ourselves. That's exactly what I want. And third, we bring people with us. Maria, David, James, all the others who helped build this. They deserve to be part of what comes next. Their voices matter. I wouldn't dream of doing this without them. Amelia's voice was warm. Welcome to the next chapter, Caleb. The Owen Grant Foundation officially launched in March with a mission statement that Amelia and Caleb had written together. To prove that treating people with dignity isn't just morally right, it's strategically sound. To teach that profit and principle can coexist. To honor the legacy of a man who believed every person had equal value, and to help companies operate on that belief. The response was overwhelming. Within the first month, they had inquiries from 43 companies wanting to implement similar changes. Some were genuine. Leadership teams tired of toxic cultures, CEOs who wanted to build something sustainable. Others were just chasing positive PR. Caleb and his team got good at telling the difference. Maria became the foundation's director of implementation, helping companies navigate the practical challenges of cultural transformation. David built technological platforms that tracked metrics and facilitated transparency. James focused on family leave policies and work-life balance initiatives. And dozens of other Granton employees volunteered time to mentor other companies, to share what they'd learned, to prove that change was possible. By summer, the foundation had helped 7 companies implement comprehensive reforms. By fall, that number had grown to 22. And the data was consistent. Companies that genuinely committed to treating employees well saw improvements in productivity, retention, and profitability. The Granton model wasn't just idealistic, it worked. Caleb found himself speaking at conferences, being interviewed for business journals, consulting with CEOs who'd spent years operating one way and were now desperate to find another path. It was surreal and exhausting and deeply fulfilling. He thought often of Owen Grant, wondered if the captain could have imagined his death leading to this, not just saving his daughter, but helping reshape how companies thought about the people who worked for them. One October afternoon, nearly 8 years to the day since Owen Grant had died in Afghanistan, Caleb and Amelia stood in what had once been an empty lot in a struggling Chicago neighborhood. It was now a park, green space with playground equipment and benches, trees still young but growing stronger. There was a small plaque near the entrance, but it wasn't what Caleb had expected. Instead of Owen Grant's name in massive letters, the plaque simply read, "This park honors all those who serve quietly. The teachers, janitors, caregivers, interpreters, and everyday heroes whose work makes our world possible. May we see them, value them, and learn from them." And underneath, in smaller letters, dedicated to the memory of CPT Owen M. Grant, who understood that honor doesn't need an audience. "This is what should have been built from the beginning," Amelia said quietly. "Not a monument to one man, but a space that honors what he believed, that celebrates the people he would have celebrated." "He would love this," Caleb agreed. "You know what's funny? This cost a fraction of what Valor Square would have cost. And it's going to matter more. Kids will play here, families will gather, people will rest and read and exist without needing to prove their worth." She smiled. "Turns out being practical and being principled aren't mutually exclusive." Movement caught Caleb's eye, Lily running toward them with Mrs. Chen walking more slowly behind. His daughter had shot up over the past year, was starting to lose the round-faced softness of early childhood. But her grin was still the same, bright enough to light up the gathering dusk. "Daddy, look what we found!" She held up a perfect red leaf, autumn colors blazing. "Mrs. Chen says we can press it in a book and it'll stay beautiful forever." "That's right," Caleb said, kneeling down. "You preserve it so the beauty lasts." "Like you preserved the soldier's promise," Lily said. "You kept it safe until it could grow into something beautiful." Amelia made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Your daughter is remarkably wise." "She's an old soul," Caleb and Mrs. Chen said in unison, then laughed. They walked through the park together as evening settled over Chicago. And Caleb thought about journeys and destinations, about promises made in dust and blood that had blossomed into this: a park, a foundation, a company transformed, lives changed in ways both large and small. His phone buzzed with a text from Hassan Ahmed in Virginia. "Happy anniversary. We lit candles. Thank you again for everything." And another from Richard Morton. "Owen would be so damn proud of all of you. Wish he could see what you've built." And one more from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Rebecca from accounting. Just wanted to say thank you. My daughter asked me today what I do for work, and for the first time in my career I was actually proud to tell her. That's because of you and Ms. Grant. Thank you for showing us we deserved better." Caleb looked at Lily running ahead, at Amelia walking beside him still wearing her father's dog tags, at Mrs. Chen humming something in Mandarin, at the park that honored quiet heroes, at the city stretching endlessly in every direction full of people trying their best with whatever they had. 8 years ago, Owen Grant had pressed a dog tag into his hand and made him promise to find his daughter, to tell her about honor, to watch over her until she understood. Caleb had thought it was a simple promise: deliver a message, tell a story, fulfill a dying man's final wish. He hadn't understood that the promise would become his purpose, that watching over Amelia would mean helping her transform not just herself, but an entire company, and eventually dozens more. That Owen Grant's final lesson about honor being a quiet language would ripple outward in ways that touched thousands of lives. "What are you thinking about?" Amelia asked, noticing his distant expression. "Your father. How one person's principles can change so much, even after they're gone. How legacy works. Speaking of which," Amelia pulled out her phone and showed him an email. "This came in today. It's from the Secretary of Labor. They want to use Grant & Company and the foundation as a model for a national initiative on workplace dignity. They're calling it the Grant Standard." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "The Grant Standard? Named for my father, but really it's named for what you helped build. What all of us built together." She smiled through tears. "Turns out when you do the right thing loudly enough and successfully enough, people pay attention. Other companies are watching. The government is watching. We're actually changing how business works in this country. Your father would say that's not the point. The point is doing right because it's right, not for recognition." True. But I think he'd also say that if doing right publicly helps other people do right, then the recognition serves a purpose. Amelia looked at the park, at the plaque honoring quiet heroes. "We're speaking his language now, the quiet one. We're just doing it loud enough that others can learn it too." Lily came running back, breathless and grinning. "Daddy, can we come here every week? I love this park." "We can come as often as you want." "Good. Because I think this is where heroes come to remember why they became heroes in the first place." She said it with that unnerving 7-year-old wisdom that cut straight to truth. "It's quiet here, and you said the best heroes are the quiet kind." As twilight deepened and they prepared to leave, Caleb took one last look at the park, at the place that honored Owen Grant not with statues or spectacle, but with space for people to simply exist and be valued, at the physical manifestation of principles that had seemed naive but proved revolutionary. He thought about that October day in Afghanistan when everything had gone wrong and somehow, impossibly, led to this moment, about dog tags and promises, about daughters and legacies, about the strange alchemy that turned tragedy into transformation. And he thought about honor, not as a word or concept, but as a way of being, something you practiced in small moments and difficult choices, something that spoke in actions rather than announcements, a quiet language that, when enough people learned it, could change everything. "Ready to go home?" Amelia asked. "Yeah," Caleb said, taking Lily's hand. "Ready." As they walked away from the park, Lily started humming something, the same tune Mrs. Chen had been humming earlier, though she probably didn't realize it. A melody carrying forward, changing slightly, but keeping its essential character, like principles passed from generation to generation, like promises kept and renewed, like honor spoken in a quiet language that would outlast them all. Behind them, the park settled into evening stillness. The plaque caught the last of the daylight, its message simple and profound, that everyone who serves quietly deserves to be seen, that honor doesn't need monuments, that the best legacies are lived rather than carved in stone, and somewhere, in memory, in principle. In the countless lives changed by a dying man's final lesson, Owen Grant smiled. The promise was complete. The quiet language was being spoken, and the world was listening.